Ladies and gentlemen, something incredible is happening in our world, something that people said would never happen. After decades of conflict, pain, and division, we are now seeing something that no one believed possible: peace beginning to rise from the dust of Gaza. And I'm telling you, it's not just politics, it's not just negotiation. It feels like something bigger. It feels like the world is being spoken to directly by the hand of God Himself. Now, some people will say, it's just another ceasefire. No, it's not. This is different. For the first time in a long time, hearts are being moved, walls are being shaken, and the world is starting to listen. Maybe, just maybe, this is a message from above. Maybe God is showing us that peace doesn't come from power alone, but from purpose, faith, and courage. Look around you. Nations are watching, leaders are rethinking, and people who once shouted are now whispering. Maybe there's hope. That's a miracle. That's not politics, that's divine timing. And that's why you need to stay with me, because tonight we're not just talking about Gaza or the Middle East. We're talking about humanity, destiny, and what the voice of heaven might be trying to tell us all. Because when God speaks through peace, even in a place that has known nothing but war, the entire world should stop and listen. When we look at Gaza today, after years and years of pain, struggle, and heartbreak, something remarkable is beginning to unfold. It's not just a political change, it's spiritual. For a long time, people said that peace in Gaza was impossible. They said the hatred was too deep, the wounds too fresh, the leaders too divided. But now we are witnessing something that feels different, something that makes us stop and ask, what if God is trying to show us something right now? Maybe the peace we're beginning to see is not just a human achievement. Maybe it's a divine message to remind us that no matter how broken things become, restoration is always possible. You see, for generations, Gaza was known only for conflict. The images were always the same: destruction, grief, anger, endless talks that led nowhere. But now, in the middle of the dust and ruins, there's a quiet message of hope. It's as if God is saying, look, I can bring peace even here. The power of that should shake every nation, every leader, and every heart. Because if peace can begin in Gaza, the very symbol of division, then it can happen anywhere. Maybe this is God reminding us that He is still in control, even when humanity forgets. Maybe He's showing us that peace doesn't begin in the halls of government, but in the hearts of people who finally realize that hate leads nowhere. Maybe He's showing us that faith can still move mountains, even the mountains of distrust and revenge. Every generation needs a sign, something to wake them up, something to remind them that the story isn't over yet. Gaza might just be that sign. It's as if God is saying, watch closely, I'm not finished. I still have plans for this world. When we think about peace, most people imagine calm skies, quiet streets, and smiling faces. But true peace, the kind that lasts, is not born in comfort, it's born in chaos. The peace emerging in Gaza is not fragile silence, it is strength rising from ashes. It's as if God is showing us that peace doesn't come when everything is easy. It comes when humanity chooses light even while surrounded by darkness. For too long, the world has believed that peace could be negotiated like a deal, signed like a paper, or forced by power. But maybe God is reminding us that peace must be reborn inside the human soul before it can live in nations. Look at the people who have suffered the most: the mothers, the children, the families who lost everything and still choose to forgive. That's not weakness, that's divine power. That's God's lesson to the world. Peace is not made by politicians, it's made by people who decide to stop the cycle of hate. Maybe that's why this moment in Gaza is so powerful, because it's not coming from pride or dominance, it's coming from exhaustion, from hearts that have finally said, enough. Perhaps God is whispering to the world, See what can happen when humanity reaches its breaking point and still chooses mercy. The peace in Gaza might be the world's wake-up call that no war, no ideology, and no boundary can destroy the human desire for compassion. Every great transformation in history began when people finally understood that love is stronger than revenge. And maybe that's what we're witnessing, a spiritual transformation, not a political one. The kind that makes nations rethink their values, that makes enemies see each other as human again, that makes the world realize peace doesn't have to be perfect to be real. Because sometimes, when everything has been taken away, people finally discover what truly matters, and that's when peace becomes possible. There is something extraordinary about how silence follows the storms of war. It's in that silence that people begin to hear what they could never hear before. Maybe that's what's happening right now in Gaza, a divine pause, a sacred moment where the world is being asked to listen, not to the noise of politics or the echo of blame, but to something deeper, something eternal. Maybe God is speaking not just to leaders or nations, but to ordinary people everywhere, saying, "Look at what division has done. Now imagine what unity could build." The peace in Gaza is not just about the end of conflict. It's about the start of understanding, the awakening of a collective conscience that has been asleep for too long. For years, the world watched the suffering and grew numb. It became normal to see despair, but now there's a shift, a small light in the distance that refuses to go out. Maybe that light is not just a sign of peace. Maybe it's a lesson that humanity can only move forward when it finally feels again, when it chooses empathy over indifference. God might be using Gaza as a mirror to show us who we've become and who we could still be if we remembered compassion. Because peace is not the absence of war, it is the presence of understanding. And understanding begins when people stop shouting long enough to hear the pain in each other's stories. That's what makes this moment so powerful. It's forcing the world to slow down and look within. Maybe God is saying, you cannot fix what you refuse to feel. The peace we see in Gaza, no matter how fragile, might be the world's chance to remember that every act of mercy is sacred, every gesture of reconciliation is divine, and every time two hearts forgive, heaven takes notice. Maybe what God is showing the world through the peace in Gaza is that real strength doesn't come from weapons, armies, or power. It comes from restraint, from the courage to stop fighting when every instinct tells you to keep going. For years, both sides believed that victory meant domination, that peace would only come when one had conquered the other. But now, in this quiet turning point, it feels like God is redefining what victory truly means. Maybe He's saying that the greatest victory is not in defeating your enemy, but in defeating the hatred within yourself. The peace we are witnessing is not built on fear, it's built on fatigue, faith, and finally understanding that endless fighting only leads to endless loss. This moment challenges the world's definition of power. The strongest people are not those who destroy, they are those who rebuild. The most powerful nations are not those who impose their will, they are those who inspire hope. Maybe God is using Gaza to remind humanity that strength and humility were never meant to be opposites. Peace requires the same courage as war, maybe even more. It takes faith to believe that laying down arms can achieve more than raising them ever did. And there's something remarkable happening when you look closer. People who once saw each other only through the lens of fear are now daring to imagine coexistence. Families who buried their loved ones are daring to believe their children might grow up without the sound of sirens. That kind of hope doesn't come from politics, it comes from heaven. It comes when people decide to see each other not as enemies, but as souls created by the same God. Maybe that's what God is teaching the world right now, that strength is not measured by how loudly we fight, but by how bravely we forgive. Maybe God is using the peace in Gaza to remind the world that every generation is given a choice to repeat the mistakes of the past or to rise above them. For decades, humanity has chosen division, anger, and pride. Each time peace was within reach, it slipped away because people cared more about being right than being reconciled. But now something different is happening. It feels like the world is being offered another chance, a divine invitation to do better this time. Maybe this peace is not an accident. Maybe it's mercy. Maybe God is saying, "You've seen enough destruction to understand that this isn't the way." This moment is more than political change. It's spiritual accountability. The peace in Gaza isn't just about two sides. It's about all of us. How we treat one another. How we value life. How we honor truth over ego. Every time humanity chooses peace, it writes a new chapter of hope. And that's exactly what the world is witnessing now. Maybe God is showing that his plans are bigger than our prejudices, that his mercy can reach even the places we've given up on. And perhaps this is a message not just for leaders and nations, but for every single person. Because peace doesn't begin with treaties, it begins with hearts. It starts in homes, in conversations, in moments when we choose to forgive instead of retaliate. Maybe that's the secret the world has forgotten. That divine peace starts small, like a spark, but once it ignites, it can light up the darkest corners of the earth. The peace in Gaza could be God's way of saying that healing is still possible, even after everything. That no matter how divided the world becomes, his will is always restoration, not ruin. That every ending can still be rewritten when humanity finally listens to his call for compassion, for mercy, and for unity.